A cyber attack hits the world's largest meat supplier. The USDA gets a boost in Biden's proposed budget, and we walk the fields scouting for corn and soybean frost damage. I'm Janelle Brose, and this is Farm News 5.
Farm News 5 is brought to you by Ford.
Last month, it was a fuel pipeline on the East Coast, and now the United States' largest meat processor has been hit by a cyber attack. The weekend attack shut down JBS's 9 plants across the country for several days. The vast majority were up and running again on Wednesday. JBS isn't alone. 40 other food companies have been targeted by hackers over the last year.
That shutdown had an impact on our farmers here in Michigan and beef cattle farmers and meat producers across the country, as we saw an immediate decline in cash cattle prices, those prices paid to our farmers. Since that time, operations are getting back to normal, but we did see short-term market disruptions. That led to decreased prices for our farmers, and it's a real concern. Consolidation in the meatpacking industry has become a real challenge. In fact, this past year, Michigan Farm Bureau members passed a resolution at our annual meeting calling for the American Farm Bureau Federation to put in a meat processing, meat industry task force to take a look at a number of issues surrounding the meatpacking industry. The cybersecurity issue has not yet come up, but it is one that will no doubt get discussion now as we look at how consolidated the meatpacking industry has become, the vulnerabilities within our supply chain, and the concerns about supply chain shutdowns. We experienced that last year because of COVID, and we can ill afford to go through another supply chain disruption anytime in the near future. I don't think we're looking at a long-term problem with this particular situation. The long-term problem, though, comes in when we talk about protecting our business and industries from cybersecurity threats and attacks. You know, we're very vigilant in Farm Bureau in our offices about making sure that as employees we are trained in properly dealing with cybersecurity threats and attacks. And it's probably an area that, from an agricultural standpoint, we need to take more seriously, we need to look at more closely, and we need to make sure that we're protecting our businesses, our computer operations, and our farm operations relative to cybersecurity attacks and threats.
Coming up, scout for frost damage in your corn and bean fields.
There's torque. Then there's 1,050 pound-feet of available best-in-class torque. There's towing. Then there's up to 37,000 pounds of available best-in-class towing. There's backing up a trailer. Then there's backing up with available class-exclusive Pro Trailer Backup Assist. In other words, there are trucks, and then there's the new Ford Super Duty, the most capable heavy-duty pickup truck ever built.
Field crops across the state may have been impacted by another May frost event. Missy Bauer with B&M Crop Consulting advises growers to scout their fields and evaluate stands.
So what's good and viable? We'll take a look here. It's pretty easy at this point to pick out the dead ones here. We are here a few days after the frost damage. You can see this one's totally dead. I got these examples here of ones that are dead. So you can see where the cotyledons are, it was dead. The main growing, or the 2 growing points there are dead. The main one's dead, so there's no question all these beans are going to be not in our count because they're dead. Then we're going to have some beans that are like this. So you can see the main growing point died, the unifoliates died, but down in here at the cotyledons are still green, and you can see I got some new regrowth happening there. See it on this one as well. Again, burnt this off, but you can see a nice regrowth coming in here by the cotyledons. So at this point, if you're going to have regrowth, it's going to be starting to show up because we're enough days after that frost damage. You take one like this here where we froze off the unifoliates, the main growing point, this cotyledon. This other cotyledon does have some green yet on it, but you look in there, it's pretty debatable if this is going to actually survive or not. And then we want to actually feel what that turgor pressure is underneath those cotyledons. This one's starting to feel a little weak, so I'm probably just going to, at this point, not count this one. You know, he may end up making it, but he's going to be pretty questionable. And I want to know what I have for good solid counts out here. So do some evaluations, figure out what's your total population at this point. We got a good solid 70, 80,000 population. We're going to be leaving the stand here as we're at the beginning of June now. So we've moved over into the cornfield now to evaluate the frost damage as well from May 30th. If you go out to your fields and all your tissue's kind of burnt down to the ground, then what you have to do is split your stems open and make sure the inside is still green or healthy, that bright kind of yellow color, because I haven't seen the sunlight yet, but it's healthy in the inside. So I go ahead, starting at the crown, and I just kind of split these up. And I want to make sure everything in here is nice and healthy yet. You can see everything in here looks real good. So on the outside it could look like the corn's dead, but the growing point here in this corn's pretty well protected. We're going to stay around this crown till about that V5 to V6 growth stage. Now I would say a lot of the corn in Michigan was somewhere between maybe V2 and V5 stage at the time of the frost. So the bigger your corn was, the more the concern whether or not your growing point's healthy. So if you go out there and you got all the dead tissues, split them open and see what you got there. If this is not healthy, then we know that corn is dead and you'd be looking at a replant situation. One of the most important things right now to do in your corn, you go out and you've got this type of damage out there, is not to add any more stress to this. So a lot of people are right now getting ready to do post-emergence herbicides, or in the middle of doing that. We need to hold off and give this corn a little time to recover before we add that extra stress of the herbicide itself. So we're going to recommend waiting on maybe 120 heat units or so before we come out and post-emerge. What that's going to do is basically let us grow and develop another collar on this corn before we add that extra stress.
Up next, Biden releases his budget proposal. What's in it for Michigan?
At Farm Bureau Insurance, the experience you get with our local trusted advisors is different. From financial security to a helping hand, Farm Bureau understands the experience matters. Find an agent who can protect what matters to you.
President Joe Biden recently outlined his proposed $6 trillion budget for the next fiscal year. USDA's slice of the pie is $28 billion, which is an increase from last year. But what's really in and not in the proposal for Michigan farmers?
We look at this budget and we see that there's some additional money for the Department of Agriculture, additional money for broadband, obviously infrastructure. The President combined both of his infrastructure plans that he's already proposed into this package. That's what brings it to the $6 billion figure. But ultimately we're going to be watching this closely. We know that some of the funding mechanisms for this bill include things like the step-up in basis, elimination of step-up in basis, and higher capital gains at death, which would negatively impact large amounts of our farmers across the country. It's important to know, though, that a president's budget is a suggestion of the priorities for his party, and ultimately Congress will decide what's going to be in that budget for the year. So we expect it to change considerably based on what we see today.
For more news and videos, visit MichiganFarmNews.com or the Michigan Farm Bureau channel on YouTube. With Farm News 5, I'm Janelle Gross. Have a great week of farming.